Welcome to the center, everyone. I'm glad you're here this evening. I've been partnering with this cute little Sam French for this whole speaker series, which has been a lot of fun for me. And we've gotten a lot of knowledge and history about this area. And some of these authors that we've had have been amazing. We've got some great books, right, Sam?
Yes.
We have. Martin Materis was awesome.
Yes.
He was really engaging. And actually, every presentation we've had has been great. So I thank you for the opportunity to partner with you, Sam. It's been really awesome. So I'll turn it over to you, Sam. And does everyone know Sam French? She is the director at the Blaine County Museums here. If you don't know Sam, you should. She's kind of fun, and she's cute, and she's engaging. So this is Sam French.
Thank you for the introduction, Ginger.
You're welcome.
And thank you for the compliments. I don't know that they're all true, but it's very flattering for the list. I'd like to say good evening to you all, and thank you for attending the 4th speaker event in Blaine County Museum's 2024 off-season speaker series. As Ginger said, I'm Samantha French, or Sam, and I'm the director of Blaine County Museum, and I'll be introducing tonight's speaker, Rod Benson. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few program and museum updates. And by a few, I mean a lot, so please bear with me. Our spring 2024 exhibit will be Briskly Venture, Briskly Roam, the life and legend of Yellowstone County, all known from the Western Heritage Center in Billings. We are open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday this winter and spring, so stop by and see what's new because there's plenty. On the center table sits our contribution box for this program. These speaker events are free to the public, but the museum does pay speaker honoraria and mileage when necessary. Your donation will help us sustain this program for future seasons. So if you enjoy tonight's events, please donate what you can. As always, the museum thanks our wonderful hosts, Ginger Hansen and the Chinook Senior Center, who graciously allow us to use their venue for our speaker program this year. These events could not succeed without their continued willingness to collaborate with us, which has not been a small task. A great deal of credit is due to Ginger for putting so much of her own volunteer time, resources, and energy into this program. If you've enjoyed these events, please thank her. She has gone out of her way to make them special and delicious because she prepares all the food. Many of you may already know or be aware of tonight's speaker, Rod Benson, as he is a Harlem native, and his hiking blog, BigSkywalker.com, is quite well known. Benson lives in Helena, and he currently teaches in Hits. He is in his 42nd and final year of teaching high school science. Rod has learned as much as he can about geology, the geology of north central Montana, and he has hiked many miles, exploring and photographing the area's beautiful landscape. Benson enjoys sharing what he has learned in his classes and through his blog, where he shares virtual photo tours of his hiking routes. His presentation will be a Reader's Digest version of his class and online content, highlighting the fascinating geological history of the Blaine County area. Tonight, I hope you are as thrilled as I am to experience millions of years of local history in a little over an hour's time. Please help me welcome Rod Benson.
Probably the biggest break I ever got in my education career was from a Chinook sugar beater. I'd been teaching for 12 years, and mostly in Harlem and Broadview. And every year it seems like I was preparing for 3 or 4 different science classes, coaching 2 or 3 different sports, and by then we had 4 kids. So I was kind of just treading water, and my arms were getting tired. And in 1994, I got a call from a guy named Ken Stuker. Some of you know Ken. Ken had just become the new principal at Helena High School, enrollment 1,500, and they had a mass retirement that took place that year. There was some sort of incentive in the district, so they needed all sorts of teachers. So I ended up teaching freshman earth science at Helena High School for 25 years. So 5 times a day, 5 days a week, I taught freshman earth science for 25 years. So it was really nice, especially to not have to coach. You know, I didn't have to worry about coaching. Coaching wasn't nearly as fun as playing basketball. I think I told one relative if I ever coach varsity basketball again, it would be at an orphanage. So I could focus on my subject area. And that's where I kind of learned a lot about the geology of Montana, including the geology of this area. And then after I retired, I took on the job in Hayes. I've been there. I was going to be there for 5 months. 5 years later, I'm saying this will be the last year. Okay, so I've been kind of like a kid in a candy store, just being able to explore the beautiful landscape of the Fort Belknap Reservation and the surrounding area too. So. As I was learning about the geology of Montana, these are some of the real good resources. There's one I'd like to really draw your attention to, and that is the roadside geology of Montana. So if you're at all interested in geology, as you travel around the state, you need to have this book. I learned a lot from the first edition, and this is the second edition, which came out in 2020. The first edition was Alt and Hindman. The second edition is Hindman and Thomas. Rob Thomas is a geology professor at University of Montana Western. And he also has a Facebook page which is called Montana Geology if you're interested in that kind of thing. So teachers are supposed to start class with a bell ringer. I don't know if I have any administrators here that are checking to see if I'm doing that, but is Jay here? I don't know if Jay's here or not. Okay, so this is your bell ringer. Don't say it out loud if you know it. I just kind of want to see what my audience knows, okay? So if you think about the buttes and mountains that we have in Blaine County, what is the general type of rock? Now there's 3 general types of rocks. That might help a little bit. And if you know, raise your hand. Don't say it out loud, but I want to see if anybody knows this.
How about just one of them?
What are you going to say, Lindy?
Isn't there a lot of sandstone here?
Well, that's not a general type.
Oh, okay.
Okay, young lady back there.
Igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary.
So which is it? Which are the buttes and mountains made of?
Igneous.
You are correct. Extra credit there. So as far as rock types go, we need to have a little bit of background here. There are 3 basic types of rocks. There's igneous rocks, which used to be either magma or lava. And that's what all the buttes and mountains are made of in our county, basically, igneous rock. So we had a time when there was volcanic activity here. And then the sedimentary rocks would be like sandstones and shales and limestone. And the metamorphic rocks would be rocks that were either igneous or sedimentary, but they've been changed by heat or pressure. For example, limestone becomes marble, sandstone becomes quartzite, shale becomes slate, granite becomes gneiss, okay? All right, so in teaching the geology part of my earth science course at Helena High, geology was just part of it. Meteorology and oceanography and hydrology were also included, but geology was a big part of the course. These are some of the basics. So we've covered rock types. To understand a little bit of what we're going to get into tonight, you also need to understand this thing. So the scientists think the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and they've divided the Earth's history into time periods. And by far the most famous of those time periods is the Jurassic period. I know this might be a little hard for some of you to see, but that was made famous by the movies, of course, okay? And it's interesting that all the dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park movies are from the Cretaceous age. So the Jurassic age, or the Jurassic period, is part of the Mesozoic era. This was the time of the dinosaurs, okay? And there's certain time periods on the geologic time scale that things were going on in our area that had more influence on what we have today. And I'm going to kind of focus on those time periods and what was going on during those time periods. Another important concept is plate tectonics. So I had no idea there was such a thing as plate tectonics after I graduated from Harlem High School. We didn't have earth science. I didn't take earth science. Some of my classmates said they did, but I did not. And I went to college and started learning about the earth sciences, and I learned about the theory of plate tectonics. I just found it fascinating, and that's why I really wanted to be an earth science teacher. So the theory of plate tectonics is that the Earth's crust, the outer several miles, the hard part of the Earth is made of pieces called plates. We live on the North American plate. And the second concept is that these plates are moving inches per year. And the third point is that most of the geologic activity, most of the earthquakes and volcanoes happen right near the edge of those plates. So this is showing the earthquakes. But most of the volcanoes happen there as well. There's some exceptions, like Hawaii is volcanic. It's not near a plate boundary, and Yellowstone is another exception. Okay? So as far as plate tectonics go, this is what the scientists think the Earth was like 340 million years ago. So we would have been right about here in that light blue area. So I'm just going to give you a few snippets of time. So this is 340 million years ago, 300 million years ago, 260 million years ago, 220 million years ago. Now we're into the Triassic. This is the Jurassic. You can kind of see where we are. So the point is, sometimes we've been covered with water and sometimes we haven't. Okay? And that makes a big difference in the geology of an area. The Cretaceous period. This was the time of the dinosaurs. Okay? And then the Tertiary, about 50 million years ago, our continents, things are kind of starting to look familiar. And then 20 million years ago, and then 50,000 years ago. Okay, so that's a quick overview of some of the aspects of plate tectonics that might help you kind of understand what we're going to get into today. So this is the topics we're going to cover. And we're going to cover them from most ancient to most recent. So this would be most ancient to most recent. And these are the things that I think have had the most influence on the geology that we have in our county. You know, there were other long periods of time that are interesting as well, but maybe didn't have as much impact on what we see in Blaine County today. So we're going to start with the Mississippian period, which is right down here. And during the Mississippian period is when our Madison limestone formed. And on this graphic, it's a little more artsy geologic time scale. The Mississippian is right here. So the Madison limestone is believed to be 360 to 325 million years old. And one of my favorite exposures of Madison limestone is Mission Canyon. Mission Canyon is near Hayes. There's Hayes right there. The high school where I teach is right over the rise there. And Mission Canyon is made exclusively of Madison limestone. And this limestone was deposited when Montana was right here. Let's zoom in on that. So there's Montana right there. So we were underwater. We were under a shallow tropical part of the ocean. The darker blue would be the deeper ocean, and the lighter blue would be more shallow. Now, if you don't have rocks from a certain time period in your location, there's a few possibilities. For example, you're not going to have rocks of Mississippian age in this part of Canada because it was a high place and stuff wasn't being deposited there at the time. It was eroding from that area. But we were a basin. We were a place where stuff was being deposited. And the Madison limestone cannot be found in this part of the state right here because it's eroded away. As these mountains were built up, it got eroded away. It cannot be found on the surface in Chinook because it's far below the surface. It's deep underneath other layers, but it's down there. The places where it can be found are the places that are shaded blue like this. And some of our most iconic landforms in the state, Beaverhead Rock, Gates of the Mountains, some of the beautiful places on the Rocky Mountain front, Bighorn Canyon, sluice boxes, Gates of the Mountains, I might have mentioned that already, and the Little Rockies. And the weird thing about the Little Rockies is it kind of forms a ring around the Little Rockies. And the reason for that can be shown here. So imagine these layers. The Madison limestone would be this one right here. Imagine them being horizontal. And then magma pushing up like this. The magma never made it to the surface. It hardened underground and became rock. And then all the layers up here since then have eroded away. And we're left with, and this is highly simplified, but this is kind of how the Little Rockies formed right here. So that Madison limestone can be found as kind of a wall around the whole mountain range. So one of my favorite spots is on this cliff over here, kind of behind the Helgeson place, if you're familiar with that. And the next photo was taken there. So this is some of my hiker friends right here. We're up on top of the cliff, and you can see that this limestone is not anywhere near horizontal anymore. It's just pretty much vertical. And then over here is that same spot. It's a drone shot. If you look at that, that would be that spot right there, which on this old geology map would correspond to this spot right here. So we're looking at the same spot from 3 different graphical points of view. Now the canyons, everybody's familiar with Mission Canyon, but my personal favorite is Little Chief Canyon. There's plenty of beautiful canyons. Now on the north side where the rocks are pretty much vertical, there's not much of a canyon there. But where it's more gently sloping like it is here, the water was allowed to cut more of a canyon. And this is the one place where if you want to hike in the Little Rockies, there is a public trail here. If you want to get up close and personal with Mission Canyon, I've got a blog post about that on bigskywalker.com. And then this is Little Chief Canyon over by Lodgepole. My cousin John and his wife Carletta happen to live right there. There's Lodgepole right there. You can see that's the part that burned in the fire a few years ago. And I think the next picture was taken right down in there. You can see me standing down at the bottom of that cliff there. I like to take drone photos. And then this is Little Chief Canyon. What I like about Little Chief is it's still wild. There's no road in there. It's really hard to get into. So it's real pristine. Mission Canyon with a road, everybody can do that, okay? This is just more interesting. And then this is Powderface Canyon, kind of between Hayes and Lodgepole. You can see the red, white, and blue there. That's our group. So as far as fossils, the kind of fossils you find in this, you don't just pick up rocks like this. This is one of the best ones I've found. But the kind of critters you're going to find are the kind of critters that would have lived in a warm, shallow tropical sea. Yeah. So I've transposed a geology map. I've got this old geology map, which I love, from the 1930s, and I put it on top so you can kind of see, it matches up. And every place you have that blue and light blue is Madison limestone. And the yellow is the igneous core. That's the igneous rock that came up and caused the mountains to be there. So next, we're going to go on to the Jurassic. There aren't a lot of Jurassic age rocks in our county, but the Jurassic was the middle time period in the Mesozoic era. This is the time of the dinosaurs, the Mesozoic era. And it ended abruptly about 65 million years ago with an asteroid hit the Earth and caused a mass extinction event, including the dinosaurs. So during the Jurassic time, once again, we were underwater. And the only reason I bring this up is because there's a real neat kind of fossil that we find out in the Little Rockies. And it can be found in this Jurassic age rock, which is on the perimeter of the limestone. It's outside the limestone. So here you have the limestone, and then you have the Jurassic age rock. And on this map, there's the Mission, St. Paul's Mission. This is Hayes. And here is that Jurassic age rock. It's kind of right before you go into the canyon. And there's a place over here called Star Hill. Some of you may have heard of it. So the stars that are kind of famous out there are these fossils right here that look like little stars. They're pretty cool. But it was a Jurassic age species of something called a crinoid. I'll show you what they look like. Then you have I think an oyster, and then you have these weird things that look like bullets. And these are actually pretty abundant in some places. So the bullets, let's start with the bullets. So these look like bullets. They're actually an organism called a belemnite. And that would be this thing right here. So what you're looking at is the soft part rotted away, and the shell part, this part right here, is kind of the bullet fossil. Looks like a bullet. Looks like those. And the stars are actually, they're not starfish. They're not little starfish. What they are is they're part of an organism called a crinoid. And it's actually an animal. And these animals would attach themselves to the bottom seafloor. And they'd be somewhat flexible. And they would have this part which would gather the food and ingest it. And when it would die, these things would fall apart. So these were segments of a particular species of crinoid that lived during the Jurassic period. They're cute. Okay, so next we're on to the Cretaceous. And this was a major player in the geology of our area. And I've got a little animation that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to kind of talk as it shows over and over again. So what you're seeing is the Western Interior Seaway. There's Montana right there. And up here is millions of years ago. Okay? So this was a major player in the geology of the Blaine County area. And keep in mind, it's kind of hard to imagine, but you're watching millions of years go by in a matter of seconds. So it kind of tricks your mind a little bit. But most of the rocks found beneath our soils or exposed in our coulees and gullies, road cuts, most of our layers are associated with this sea. So when we were in deeper water, when we had deeper water over us, the type of material that would have been deposited on us would have been real fine-grained. If we were by the shore, it would have been more sand. If there was a swamp along the shore that got covered, that would be a seam of coal. If there was a volcano that erupted, and there was a lot of that. There's a volcano over by Helena called, well, the remnants of a volcano called the Elkhorn volcano, which apparently erupted quite frequently, and ash would go into our Western Interior Seaway. And it would sink to the bottom and over time get altered, and that's bentonite. That's the bentonite that we have. So the changing of this was very slow, but we're watching it happen very fast, was caused by this plate pushing into this plate, causing the mountains to form and causing slight changes in the elevation of our area. And it was very shallow. It wasn't a very deep ocean. They say about half a mile at most, which isn't very deep. You think about the Atlantic and Pacific are several miles deep. So most of the rocks we have in our county are associated with this Western Interior Seaway. All right, I'll get back to this. This is where it might be a little clumsy. All right, worked. So here's a bigger view, 94 million years ago. So there would have been dinosaurs wandering. This was, when the dinosaurs were wandering our shores and things like that. So just north of Chinook, as you're coming down into Chinook, there's the Milk River in the background. The series of layers right here is part of that. That's called the Judith River Formation. And it was a coastal or near coastal area 80 to 75 million years ago. There's Miles Butte out by Cleveland. And this is an outcrop of Eagle sandstone, same stuff you find in Billings. Basically the same layer as the rim rocks. So this would have been, when the sand was being deposited here, this would have been near shore. This was graduation at Hayes a couple years ago. We've got a good exposure of Judith River Formation over here. There you can see Miles Butte in the background now. And this is north of Harlem, northwest of Harlem. Again, Judith River Formation. Bentonite would be the ash that fell and was altered, kind of became a real gray clay. Sometimes you find seams of coal, shales, sandstones, because the shoreline was always changing. And this is southwest of Zortman. That's my friend Rick Weasel. And you have a real distinct white line there. That's ash from a volcano. That's what it is. So in this geology map of the Chinook and Harlem area, KJR means Judith River. It's from the Cretaceous. We spell Cretaceous with a C, the Germans spell it with a K, so anytime you see that K, it's Cretaceous age rock. So pretty much all the rock is Cretaceous age. This would be Bear Paw Shale up here. There's a neat fossil site kind of north of John and Holly Cowles, kind of between the old rodeo grounds in Harlem and the airport. And I came across it when I was just kind of trespassing back there. And it's just covered with shells. It's kind of neat to find a place that you just pick the shells up. So this is part of that Western Interior Seaway.
Isn't that where we had keggers at, Rod?
I didn't go to those keggers. Okay, and then down by the river, the UL Bend area, you're into Bear Paw Shale. And there's a place by UL Bend where you can just walk along the bank of the river and you stumble across fossils every 20 feet or so. It's kind of neat. It's fun to find stuff like that. And then as you're heading south of the DY, right about mile marker 100, that you see some cut banks. And again, you can kind of see the layers of ash. I found that fossil probably 100 yards from the highway along this stream here. I think it's Slippery Ann Creek. So those white layers are ash deposits from volcanoes to the west. There's another ash layer, really quite common in the Bear Paw Shale. So this is about as simple as it gets when it comes to geology diagrams. The green area where we are is all rock layers from the Mesozoic era, the time of the dinosaurs. The red is igneous rock, and the blue is the Mississippian. It's the Madison limestone, so you can see we have quite a variety in our area. So next is volcanic activity. So from about 70 to 50 million years ago, there was volcanic activity in our area. And that explains all the bumps on our landscape, the buttes and mountains. So I show this. This is one of my favorite maps to show my students. So the red areas are places where the lava came out. There was eruptions. And the gray places are places where the magma, we call it magma if it doesn't come out, it cooled beneath the ground and now it's above the ground because it became rock, and igneous rock is real tough. It resists erosion better than all those soft sedimentary layers. So any place you see red, there was lava erupting onto the surface, volcanoes. And the high woods. One of my favorite stretches of highway is when I drive home to Helena, I drive right through the guts of this volcano right here. And it's kind of neat. You can actually see some of the flow layers, and if you know what to look for, you can identify some other features. In the Big Elkhorn volcano, which sat between Helena and Butte, there's not anything really left of it, but that is responsible for a lot of the bentonite that we have around here. The ash from that got deposited on the bottom of the Western Interior Seaway and became our bentonite. So here's a graphic that is kind of like very similar to the way the situation between Helena and Butte played out. So just think of this as the Elkhorn volcano. The magma is still molten. Eventually, it becomes inactive. The magma chamber hardens and becomes rock. And then over the years, all of this stuff is eroded away. And now you're down to the old magma chamber. So when you drive from Butte to Helena, you're driving through a rock that is, it's granite. Okay, it's magma that cooled underground. And that Elkhorn volcano would have been right in this area, so all the ash would fall in here. A lot of it would. Now, the most interesting place on the High Line, perhaps the most interesting place on Highway 2. Highway 2 starts in the coast of Washington, goes all the way to Michigan. I think the most interesting place is in Blaine County. And it's right there. So Snake Butte is interesting on so many levels. You know, the significance to Native Americans is a sacred place. It played a major role in the construction of Fort Peck. The geology is very interesting. Wildlife, rattlesnakes, bison. If you want to keep people away from a place, name it Snake Butte, right? Yeah. And the scenery is incredible. I was up there last fall with a friend, and we were just surrounded by buffalo. It was so beautiful. So it is a sacred place, and most of the high places on the reservation are considered to be sacred. The native people, the Aani and Nakota people, still do fasting and praying. Most of my hiking is during the time of year when it's not warm enough to do that at night. So I don't run into that. But if you wanted to hike on the reservation, I would say find a tribal member and get them to take you up here. My friend Rick Weasel and I do a lot of hiking. My situation's a little different because I live out there and I work there. I take young people to places, so I kind of have a free pass, okay? But if you want to do some hiking on the reservation, Havre Trails, I've worked with Havre Trails to offer a couple hikes, and we'll probably offer one again to Snake Butte this spring. So Snake Butte is a laccolith. It formed underground in a way similar to this. This diagram is not of Snake Butte, but it's very similar. So magma worked its way up into the layers and squeezed in between a couple of the layers and just kind of filled that space. It's called a laccolith, lake of rock. Never made it to the surface, didn't erupt onto the surface. And it hardened, it became rock. And then, over time, the softer sedimentary rock eroded away, exposing the more durable igneous rock. That's how it formed, okay? And a lot of the buttes in central Montana formed this way. There's some nice ones around Great Falls, Square Butte, Crown Butte, and others. They're not all the same shape. Sometimes they're very different shapes. This is a drone photo looking from above, and one of the features that you notice is it looks like there's a fence around it. I mean, these right here, we'll zoom in a little bit. So isn't that cool? So that's called columnar jointing. Columnar jointing is actually pretty common. It's not a strange thing at all. There's a lot of places in the world where you can see columnar jointing. As you go through Washington, you see a lot of it. So what happens is, as the magma cools, it also shrinks and cracks into these geometric columns. It's kind of weird. I don't really get it, but it's very common, actually. Classic example is Devil's Tower. And if you ever get a chance to go walk around Devil's Tower, you'll see some climbers. See the climbers up there? Climbers love cracks. They can put their gear in there. They do. They really like cracks. If it doesn't have cracks, it's harder to climb. But this is the Giant's Causeway. I think it might be Ireland, but it's pretty common. And you see it on Snake Butte. There's me in my blue shirt right there, which seems to be the one that shows up the best for drone photos, is that bright blue. And here I am on top, and you can kind of see, looking down at the columns, you can see they're not perfect geometric shapes, but you can kind of see you can see the tops of the columns is what you see. This is in the winter. I went out there. I thought the snow might highlight it, but there's me right there, and you can see these columns. Here you don't see them because they're covered with soil. So, I've been up on Snake Butte dozens of times, and I wanted to mention I've encountered 6 snakes, and 5 of them were in exactly the same place. So what I do is I I park over here, and I go over here to the quarry, and right up in here there's a hole, and a lot of times if the sun is shining on it and it's warm, there's a snake sitting on that hole there, so I know to kind of be careful around there. So that's the quarry right there when it was active back in the 1930s. And my cousin Bob Benson, worked there back in the 1930s. And the rock was hauled from the quarry by rail to Harlem. And I've walked much of this. I walked probably to right about here and then back. Someday I would like to walk the whole thing. There's no bridge crossing the river anymore, so that's as far as I'd be able to go. But it comes into Harlem. That's part of it right there. That's part of the old railroad bed as you come into Harlem. And it came in right behind the high school. So the rock was used at Fort Peck. And it was not on this side. If you've been to Fort Peck, you've probably driven across the dam. It was used on this side right here. Riprap. And that's all rock from Snake Butte right there. So south of Snake Butte, there's a Wild Horse Butte, and then there's 3 buttes. And they're all things that formed underground. They call them intrusive igneous formations or plutonic formations. Wild Horse Butte is so named because apparently at least once or maybe several times in the past, I don't know, the story is that there's a couple of canyons and they wanted to catch a bunch of wild horses, so they herded them into the canyons where they would be kind of trapped. And I've been out there, I could see that working. These canyons on Wild Horse Butte would work pretty good for that. It's actually shaped kind of like a banjo when you look at it from above. It doesn't look like much from the highway as you're driving by, but there's a nice spring over here. And then 3 buttes. So this is the highway that goes into the agency from Hayes, and there's this one is on Janice Hawley land, and this is on tribal land. And so I usually hike one of these 2. But I've had permission to hike on that one as well. So, again, what happened is magma worked its way up. I don't know what it looked like underground, but somehow the magma got up there, pooled underground. The rock layers above were domed up, did not erupt to the surface, and then eventually those eroded away, and you have your 3 buttes. So if you've ever been around 3 buttes, that's usually where I park, right there. And the Little Rockies are not that much different, with the way they formed. I've kind of already explained that. This would be the igneous rock that used to be the magma. And the layers that were domed up, they're gone. They've eroded away. So if you look at the satellite view and compare it to the geology map, the yellow is the igneous core of the mountain range. And this is kind of maybe a highly simplified diagram of how that would have played out. Very similar to that. So where you have magma, sometimes you get gold. What happens is magma heats the water to incredible temperatures, superheats it, way, way hotter than boiling sometimes. And it doesn't boil because it's under pressure. It's like a pressure cooker. And then the water is so hot it dissolves minerals like quartz and gold. And sometimes the pressure cracks the surrounding rock and the water shoots into the crack and it cools, and then it deposits all the minerals that were in it, the gold and the quartz. And sometimes the water, the superheated water that has the gold dissolved in it, soaks into surrounding bedrock and you have a low-grade deposit. Kind of both of those things were true out in the Little Rockies. And Landusky and Zortman were kind of centers of the mining activity. I thought you might like to see the old Ruby Gulch Mill. Some of you probably drove past there when you were kids. I was up on Old Scraggy with my friend Rick Weasel, and we put the drone up and flew it down there and got some pretty good pictures of the old mill. And when we were sitting there, Rick looks down and there's a beautiful black arrowhead right up on top of Old Scraggy. Kind of made his day. So 2.5 million ounces were taken out. And I wanted to figure out how much gold is that. So I did the math, and if I did it right, this would be about 5 feet. So imagine a cube of gold, 5 feet tall, 5 feet wide, and 5 feet deep. That's how much gold was taken out of the Little Rockies back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This one right here is kind of interesting too. This is just a kind of a dome within the Little Rockies. It's called McNeil Ridge. And it also, you can see the limestone around the perimeter. So it's kind of like a miniature version of the mountains, basically. And this is a roadside sign that one of the governor's wives got this project going several years ago. Schweitzer's, I can't remember. Schweitzer's wife. So anyway, this right here was one that I saw on Google Earth, and I thought, wow, I've got to go see that. It looks like a crater, but it's not a crater. It's actually a dome. So that thing right there is this right here. And what happened is the magma worked its way up, domed it up, and then the erosion caused the circular pattern that you see here. The next picture was taken right there, looking kind of down. And there's my friend Rick, and there's Eagle sandstone that has been turned up from horizontal by this doming effect of the magma. On to the Bear Paws. So as much as McCann Butte looks like a volcano, it is not. I'm sorry to say it's not a volcano. I wish it was, but it's not. This is way too complicated for the Reader's Digest version. This is a geology map of the Bear Paws, or Bear's Paw Mountains. I think we're all bear paw people here, aren't we? Yeah. Okay, and then this is just of this area right here. I'm going to show you a more simplified version. So this is the more simplified version right here. So we have two big areas where there was volcanic rock that was formed as lava hardened. And then the buttes over by Cleveland, they are more like Snake Butte and Three Buttes. They formed underground. Here's another kind of simplified version of the Bear Paws. So this shading right here is rock that used to be lava. It erupted onto the surface. And then the black are places where the magma cooled underground and now it's above the ground. And it's really hard to imagine volcanoes here for me. I can't picture it. But it's pretty obvious to the geologists that that's what took place. So the roadside geology book that I referred to earlier has lots of graphics like this. And the way they represent the Bear Paw Mountains is this would be the volcanic rock, and this would be another area of volcanic rock right here. And these are the buttes. I think that would be McCann Butte and Miles Butte. Here's a closer view. And if we slice through it from Loman south through Barber Butte, we're going to slice right through there, right about there. And we look at it in cross-section, this is what it looks like. So you have the Madison limestone is there, it's just way down, okay? And then all the Cretaceous age rock from that western interior seaway is on top of it. And then here you have Barber Butte. That represents the magma that came up. A lot of it cooled underground. And then Tiger Ridge is part of the old remnant of the old volcano or volcanoes. This is a more complicated view from the same book. So apparently when this thing was pushing up, there was volcano or volcanoes on the surface, it caused an arch. And the sedimentary layers have a lot of bentonite, which is real slippery, so there was a lot of faulting. A lot of layers kind of slipped down. And somehow that, I don't really understand how that works totally, but it makes a good trap for oil and gas that like to migrate up. In this area, I understand it's mostly gas, I think. But the gas fields out there are due to the trapping effect of that that bentonite that's in the rock. So the bentonite is a pretty important part of the geology around here. This was with the Havard Trails group. This was last fall. We got permission from Ryan Houtzel to hike up on Miles Butte. So, lots of volcanic activity. Now, my favorite part, the ice ages. So the ice ages are the most recent event that I'm kind of talking about. And the ice ages are from the Pleistocene. So the Madison limestone was here. All of the layers that we have are from our Western Interior Seaway Cretaceous age. The volcanic activity was kind of in this area right here. Okay, and the Pleistocene, the ice ages, caused a lot of different things to happen. So we started to have ice ages about 2.6 million years ago. There were ice ages before, and if you're interested in when there were ice ages and why there were ice ages and how do we know, there's a book called Frozen Earth that is very good. I was kind of interested in that topic several years ago, and I just needed to figure it out. So I read several books, and the last one I read was Frozen Earth, and it pretty much summarized all the others, so I wish I'd read that one first. So, over the past million years, as it turns out, we've had an ice age about once every 100,000 years. And it's my understanding that the last 4 or 5 advanced far enough to reach our area. The ones before that, not so much. And the last one ended about 12,000 years ago. So if you look at this, we crossed some sort of threshold about 2.6 million years ago where we started to have ice ages. Each one of these would be an ice age. Lots of them. One of the weird things that nobody can figure out is for a long time, it was one every 41,000 years, but then it switched to one every 100,000 years. Nobody knows why. And the cause of ice ages is really interesting, but we'd have to be here past my bedtime to get into that. So if you're interested in ice ages, that's the best book, I think. So this shows the last glacial maximum 18,000 years ago. Interestingly, Alaska was not covered by glaciers, but pretty much all of Canada was. And the last 400,000 years, so they've named the last 4. These are the ones we know the most about. Actually, we know the most about the Illinois and the Wisconsin because they're the most recent. So this would be an ice age, warmed up fairly quickly, ice age, warmed up, etc. And since the last ice age ended, society, civilization has developed just in that short amount of time. So on this map, the line right there is the approximate southern extent of the Laurentide ice sheet. So the Bear Paws weren't covered. The Little Rockies, Hayes was not covered. The Hayes town site was not covered. It went about as far as the Missouri River. Actually, it went a little past the Missouri River. So this was discovered near Broadus. So all of these creatures, mammoths, giant ground sloths, they all disappeared about 13,000 years ago. And that's another mystery, is why did these things all of a sudden die off? Was it overhunting by the first people? Was it climate change? Was it a combination of several things? Nobody really knows. But I noticed over in the museum, they have a mammoth tooth over there. Got a neat little exhibit on ice ages over there. So one of the most dramatic things that happened during the ice age is it changed the drainage of our continent. Evidence indicates that before we started to have these ice ages about 2.6 million years ago, the drainage was towards the Hudson Bay. And it was totally altered by the onset of the ice ages. So the ice ages started with some growth centers. These were centers of growth. One was called the Keewatin and the other was the Labrador. And that's where the snow would build up year after year after year and eventually squish the bottom layers, becoming ice, and it would start to spread from there. So it's no coincidence that the position of the Missouri River corresponds pretty closely with what we think was the edge of the ice. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about with ice ages in our area is, I think a lot of you probably know this, but Chinook and Harlem and Malta, we are in the ancient valley of the Missouri River. The Milk River comes down, actually starts in Glacier Park, goes up into Canada and comes down near Havre. And around Havre, it sneaks into the ancient Missouri River Valley. So the guy that figured this out probably didn't have a satellite view in 1950. Well, I know he didn't have a satellite view, but if you look at the Milk River right here, it's a skinny little river. Then all of a sudden you get into this area and it just gets really wide. And he noticed that. And he said, something's weird here. And they eventually found beneath the soil and beneath the loose rocks a channel here, which is the ancient channel of the Missouri River. So that was the connection right there. So I've tried to match these up. So if you kind of compare the two, you can kind of see the pattern change. And even more so when you remove all the loose stuff, all the soil, and get down to the bedrock, you can see that ancient channel right there. So there's Harlem and there's the agency, and this is our Milk River Valley, we call it, but it's really the old valley of the Missouri. And since the river has such a gentle slope and a wide valley, it tends to erode side to side. And sometimes it makes shortcuts for itself, like it did here. So the Milk River is coming from here and kind of going like this. And it used to go like this, but it made a shortcut for itself right here. And this was left out. And that's Dead River, just a couple miles east of Harlem. It's a classic oxbow lake. We have lots of these in the Milk River Valley. And they're not that uncommon in other valleys. But we just have a lot of them. And that's me skating right there. We had a friend and I, you really have to have the right conditions to skate on the Dead River, but we had really perfect conditions one day. It was December 1st, actually, I remember it. It was really a fun day of skating. And then the new Missouri River Valley, is narrow. And part of the reason is because the sandstone is tougher, but the other reason is it just hasn't been going through here that long. Some of you might recognize that. That's the Eagle Creek Campground. So this is that's one of the most scenic parts of our state, the White Cliffs of the Missouri. Okay, the second thing related to ice ages is erratics. And here we have a rock. And we have these all over the county, random rocks just sitting on the prairie. You're no stranger to these random rocks. And these are metamorphic rocks. They're not made around here. They're not part of the layers of that were made by the Western Interior Seaway. They're not part of the volcanic or igneous rock. They're foreigners. So we call them erratics. And this one is a rock called gneiss, pronounced nice, and that's just about a mile or so from the border up by Canada. I guess it would be 11 miles from Turner. So the way these things got here is the glaciers were growing far up to the north in Canada. They would pluck. It's called plucking. Rocks would break off and stick to them and become embedded in them. Not so much sandstone, but more metamorphic rocks. And as this glacier spread, kind of like you're pouring pancake batter on a grill, it kind of spreads away from the centers. It spread into our part of the world. And I was kind of struggling I wanted to find out some information about the edge of the glacier, the extent of the glacier. And I was looking at some real old papers, 1906, and and the map over in the museum, and even the map in the roadside book, and they were all different. And I contacted the author of the book, and he sent me this map right here, which helped clear up a lot of things. So I'll show it to you. I know you can't see much here, but I want to zoom in. So what we have is we have the Bear Paw Mountains. Here's the Little Rockies. And this color, this kind of tan color, is areas that were covered by the second to the last glacier, but weren't covered by the most recent glacier. And then the white, of course, is the area that was covered by the most recent glacier, called the Wisconsin Ice Age. This is the Illinoisan Ice Age. Now, there's a curious area in the northern part of our county called the Boundary Plateau. And what do we call it? Big Flat, don't we? Big Flat? Yeah, that's the Big Flat. So the Big Flat, it makes sense that that's the most farmable area in that part of the county, because you think about the rest of the area, when the glacier grew across, it's just squished off all the soil, ruined the soil. But this has had like 100,000 years more for soil development. So it would be better soil here. And it's up a little higher. So Big Flat is a good name for it. So you can see there's Roy right there. So as you cross the Missouri River, when you go to Billings next time, look for erratics. That's your assignment. Look for erratics as you're going to Billings next time. And you'll see erratics all the way until about Roy Junction. And after Roy Junction, you won't see them anymore, because that's about how far the glacier went. And I was coming back the other day, and I noticed one that I hadn't seen before, so I was pretty excited to see a erratic that I hadn't seen before. Now, if we zoom in even closer, you can see Chinook there and Harlem there. And imagine the glacier, imagine what that would have been like to be on that land surrounded by the glacier. That would be kind of weird. And I think that explains some of the strangest landscape we have in our county that you probably have never noticed. These are erratics near Turner. So they're from the previous ice age, not the most recent one. As you drive out to Turner, there's some tremendous piles of erratics. They're everywhere. This is out at the battlefield. What's the most famous erratic on the High Line? You've all heard of it.
Sleeping Buffalo?
Sleeping Buffalo, yep, Sleeping Buffalo. That's got to be the most famous one. But my personal favorite, and you're thinking, don't you have a personal favorite? Mine is this one right here. This is on American Prairie Reserve. And I had my friend Rick showed this to me. It's called the Indian Lake Medicine Rock. And it is a beautiful erratic. This polished surface is because of buffalo rubbing against it. But if you look at it from above, look at all the petroglyphs on this thing. It's amazing. And it's really out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's the roads we were on. I don't know if I'd even call them roads, but it was interesting to see this. There's a whole bunch of them about 6 or 7 miles south of Highway 2 as you're heading to Hayes. And some places there are lots of them like this. So that tells me that for a significant amount of time, that was the edge, or the edge of the glacier was near that place for a significant amount of time. So the glacier is the conveyor belt, right? It's bringing the rocks from Canada. When it gets to a point where it melts, it just drops the rocks. So this had to be pretty close to the edge of the glacier for quite some time. You can see the little Rockies in the background there. Some of them are very big. The ones across the street are not erratics. Do you know where they're from? I recognize them from being in the northwestern part of the state. That's part of the belt formation. But the ones on this side of the street, I believe, are erratics. And some people take these erratics, like Roger Snyder has a big one in his yard, and I was talking to his daughter as she was cutting my hair the other day. They brought that one there. That's a big rock to be moving around. So, the 30-mile drainage north of Harlem, they're smaller. Those are erratics. Those are from Canada. And, usually metamorphic rocks. Quartzite used to be sandstone, etc. But the native people used them for teepee rings and boiling stones. Assiniboine means those who cook with stones. And they were perfect for that because they didn't fall apart like our sedimentary rock around here. They were durable, hard metamorphic rock. In the building out at Zurich Park, that's all erratics. The monument to the airmen out towards Hoagland. That one is from Snake Butte, though. I recognize that. It's pretty easy to recognize rock from Snake Butte. They're not so useful for farmers. I think everybody has probably picked rock before. This is one north of Hoagland. It's the biggest pile of erratics I've ever seen. There might be bigger ones, but this one, my dad showed it to me years ago. And not only, the size of it is one thing about it, but they picked a lot of smaller ones too, which is kind of unusual. That's over by the Silver Bow Cemetery. All right, now the boulder train is a special kind of erratic, the Snake Butte boulder train. And this is as you're driving from the agency to Hayes or vice versa. Right by mile marker 36 on the west side of the highway, we see this rock right here, this cluster of rocks. Those are pieces of Snake Butte. And what happened, shown very nicely on this map, so here's Snake Butte. There's the agency, there's Harlem. So as the glacier flowed over Snake Butte, pieces of Snake Butte got stuck to it. And as it continued to flow this way, there's all flowing this way. So this part of the glacier is flowing this way with pieces of Snake Butte stuck in it. And eventually it melted and dropped the rocks. So you get a line about a mile wide and about 40 to 50 miles long called the Snake Butte boulder train, where you find pieces of Snake Butte just scattered randomly. And it's something I'm sure you would never notice, but it's just something that's kind of interesting about the Ice Age's impact on our area. So there's not much farmers can do about these. So what they do with the Canadian rocks is they'll just pile them by the big rock from Snake Butte. As long as we're not going to farm around that rock, we're going to put the other rocks there as well. And if you ever want to stop and look at it, mile marker 35, there's a good pullout to stop at, and you look west and you'll see a lot of rocks from Snake Butte. Okay, now, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a little bump on Snake Butte on the west end, and that's where we're going to go next. So this was a picture I took, a couple friends and I, Rick, one of my teacher friends, and there's that bump right there. And several years ago, I wanted my friend Rick to show me the petroglyphs. I'd heard there were petroglyphs out there. So he took me out there and showed me the petroglyphs. And we get out there and we're looking at the petroglyphs, which were kind of cool, and I'm thinking, wow, look at those striations. So these are the striations I'm talking about, these scratches. And these scratches were caused, there's a nice petroglyph right there. You can see a hand and hoof print. So here's the striations. So as the glacier flowed over Snake Butte, rocks that were stuck to the bottom of it scratched the rock and made these striations, these scratches. And they point towards Lodgepole, which kind of confirms the direction which was indicated by the boulder train, that the ice was flowing that way. It was flowing toward the southeast. Here's some bigger ones right here. And then there's another smaller bump. This was that day where we were just walking among the buffalo. And that smaller bump right here, I took some drone photos, and the striations aren't quite as deep, but you see the polished effect. So the glacier flowed in that direction. You can kind of see with the look of the rock that it's flowing that way. Here's another view. So the lodgepole would be over in this area right here. And then this would be the flow direction right there. Okay, now this place north of Hoagland and Turner, which is so strange. As I was preparing the presentation, I think, darn, I don't really have anything for the north part of the county. I got on Google Earth and I looked around and I found something. I found something really weird. So this is the landscape I'm talking about right here. If we look at it this way and then this way, so you can kind of see the farmed land on the big flat. See it right there? It corresponds with this right here pretty closely. So that's going to be better soil because it's been around for 100,000 more years. It's had more time to develop a soil. Okay? But imagine as this ice is surrounding this island, there's going to be a lot of buildup in here. There's some kind of bottlenecks. And then as the ice age started to end, this area was impacted. So this Woody Island coulee, this drainage right here, corresponds pretty closely with that right there. And here is this is described as hummocky. They're really small, fairly steep hills, not very farmable. You wouldn't farm that land. Here's the border crossing. I think Miles Hutton, lives there. So he's got quite a commute to get to work today, every day. And it's even more strange in Canada. So this is Canada. This would be the border right here. And then this is a drone shot. I went up last winter. It was really cold and windy, so I didn't get many, but I got this. So this is the hummocky terrain that was caused by the end of the ice age, by stagnant ice. And the mechanics of how this actually happened, not everybody agrees, but I came upon this paper that I think is one possibility. So we're going to focus on this diagram right here, and I'll explain it. So what you have is pieces, big pieces of ice, the size of a gymnasium or bigger, some smaller. And as the ice age is ending, they're just kind of sitting there and they're cracked and they're melting. They're probably going to take centuries to melt, literally centuries. And what's going to happen is they're squeezing down on the soft bear paw shale, and in between them, it kind of bumps up. So that's one idea about how this hummocky landscape up by the border was formed. Another thing we have is these little lakes, and the little lakes are called kettles, sometimes prairie potholes, and they're just also caused by the stagnant ice just sitting there and taking possibly centuries to melt. Here's a place north of Saco. So just notice this feature right here. We'll zoom out, and so now it's right there, and you can see all the lakes. So the way these form, Minnesota is famous for, land of 10,000 lakes. But the pieces of ice sitting there for a time, and as the glacier is melting, it's reworking all the rocks that were stuck to it and washing them out. Since there's a piece of ice sitting there, there's going to be a hole there, a depression when the ice does finally melt, and that would be the little lakes. So which conservation organization loves kettles? Yeah, Ducks Unlimited. Yep. So this would be this kind of shows graphically how that would happen. This, if the water table is high, this would be a kettle. So we have the Minneapolis Lakers, which are now the Los Angeles Lakers. One of the most interesting ones is near Plentywood. And I want to show you this because this shows how messy it can be at the edge of these glaciers as they're melting. So this is a big piece of ice, maybe the size of a gymnasium or bigger. And what's happened is the ice age is beginning to end, and as this is melting back, all the rocks are kind of falling out of it, and the meltwater is kind of transporting them, and it gets covered by rock material. And it sits there, and soil develops on top, because this is going to take centuries. Maybe if it's covered, it's going to take centuries to melt. So trees take root, but eventually it does melt. And so if you go to Brush Lake, on the bottom of the lake are ancient trees from a previous time when they were growing on soils that were on top of the ice. So it can be real messy at the edge of these ice sheets. So this is, you can see Hoagland over here and Turner over here. And you see lots of little lakes. I'm sure some of these are reservoirs for cattle. Some of them, though, are kettles. Now we compare that to northeastern Montana. Here's Brush Lake right here. There's Medicine Lake. It's a pretty big kettle. But look at this part of North Dakota, all the spots. Those are all kettles. So they really have us beat when it comes to kettles, but I think in all other aspects of geology, we've got them beat. So, to summarize, so the ice ages, So the ice ages, that would be the Pleistocene. That's the most recent time period that had an impact on our county. The volcanic activity was probably during these three time periods. The seaway was Cretaceous, the Western Interior Seaway, and the Madison limestone was from the Mississippian. So those are the main events that impacted our geology in Blaine County area. And that's all I got. The Big Flat is part of what's called the Flaxville Formation. They used to call it the Flaxville Gravel. So it's got a lot of space for groundwater. In some places it's like 150 feet deep. Some places it's just several feet deep. I don't know, but it would make a good aquifer. Yeah.
Have you ever been on the back of Sprinkle Butte out here?
Sprinkle Butte, I haven't. I'm not familiar with Sprinkle Butte.
It's the one that has the radio tower on it.
Oh, yeah.
There's some igneous out there. Not a whole lot, but we used to hunt rattlesnakes out there. And that's where I ran into one because I was looking at the ground and he was in an elbow in the thing, just at eye level.
Yeah, it's good rattlesnake country.
Yes, it is.
Kyle, you had a question?
Has the shift of Missouri from the Milk River Valley been tied to one of the particular ice ages?
Well, let me think about that. Wouldn't it have to be the most recent one?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if research has ever been done. I know when you and I talked, that was part of what they were doing in Washington, was trying to date some of those gravels through a new method. So I don't know if it has ever been.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know that. There's an interesting situation with the Missouri called the Shonkin Sag, which is a whole nother hour. But there were glacial lakes. Glacial Lake Missoula is probably the most famous. Glacial Lake Great Falls at times even flooded back into the Helena Valley. But that's not really related to our county, but really interesting stuff. I'd really recommend that book. Yes, ma'am.
I've always been told in Chinook, like over down along the highway and down New York Street, it's the old riverbed. What riverbed?
Well, rivers change course. I mean, since we build bridges and roads and towns, we don't want the rivers to change course. But if you just let it, if there were no people here, building rivers or building bridges and roads and towns, rivers change periodically. During a flood event especially, they will, after the flood, they'll find a new course.
Couldn't it be like the Seaway or the Missouri, probably just a milk?
Well, if they said river, I would say probably milk, yeah. And a lot of times if you can find those ancient riverbeds, they make good aquifers because they've got, the right kind of sediment, so they've got lots of room for water.
So, if there was an ice age, why was there just that little island of the Big Flat?
Yeah, it was a little bit higher. Just a little bit
It had
higher.
already built up? That's,
Well, apparently it was sort of a terrace. The Flaxville Formation is gravel, that was deposited about 15 million years ago, gravel and sand that washed off of the Rocky Mountains. And much of it eroded away, but it left these sort of terraces, kind of islands, I guess you could say. And so it was a little bit higher, so the glacier didn't go over the top of it.
What just went around?
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't know that either until a few days ago. Yeah, and there was a paper that came with that map, and I tried to read the paper. It was about how they figured everything out, and it was just way too technical for me. Yeah, it wasn't Reader's Digest material.
In what period of time? I would assume it's from the interior seaway that you had of the coal formations that you have around the county. There seems to be a lot of them that are just smaller seams. A lot of places we have one that is, in a few particular areas, is maybe 15 feet from the top of the plateaus. It's just a very, very thin line, inch and a half, maybe or so, all across that whole.
Yeah, that would be from the Western Interior Seaway. So you have to imagine a swamp on the edge of the sea, and the shoreline changes, so the beach inundates, the sand overtops the swamp, and layers build up on top, and eventually that swamp material becomes coal. So if it's around here, it would be associated with the Western Interior
The
Seaway.
layer that we have that's exposed there, because there are layers that look a lot more like coal. Actually, my great-grandfather used to haul coal from the place into Harlem. This particular layer that you can see all along that elevation seems to be almost a not completely formed layer.
Yeah.
I took a look at it one time and broke a piece out of that, and you can just flake it away in layers almost like mica.
Yeah, if it's exposed, it gets oxidized, and it's not, much like coal anymore. But there's different stages in the development of coal, as it transitions from swamp material to anthracite, which is the hardest type of coal. So it's probably a low grade.
You mentioned a lot of bentonite. Has it ever been commercially mined in Montana?
I don't know. I don't know. That's right, it was, yeah. And bentonite, I should mention, a lot of times they name things based on where they're found. And so it was first identified near Fort Benton, so it's called bentonite. Yeah.
Is there anywhere else where you can see the striations, like on top of Snake Butte, where the glacier cut through?
I'm sure there is, but I'm not aware of them. I was really surprised when Rick took me up there, and because I'd never heard of them up there. I have since read articles about them being there. You can find some in Glacier Park, but around here, you have to have really hard rock. If it was just sandstone, they're not going to last, and so it would have to be igneous rock, pretty much. And I'm not aware of any others. Yeah, so if you are interested in hiking up on Snake Butte, or probably Snake Butte would be the one. Haver Trails has a Facebook page, and what I do is I offer a hike, and the hikers pay me, and it goes to the archery club. So that way the tribal people are getting something out of it. And we'll probably offer one next early May. But another great hike in Mission Canyon is a public hike that you really don't need permission. It's a trailhead called the Hole in the Wall Trail, and I've got it featured on my blog, bigskywalker.com. But that's probably the best hike in north central Montana. And I've hiked a lot of places, and I think that's one of the best. Probably one of the best in Montana outside of Glacier Park. It's not in Glacier Park.
Thank you, Rod.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate everyone's questions. This is one of the livelier Q&As we've had. So thank you for that. And all of the information kind of blows me away. I really appreciate all the extra research you put into this presentation and really representing almost every part of the county. I think that that's pretty incredible. And the fact that you all heard it here tonight, one of the most impressive geological features on the High Line is in Blaine County, Snake Butte. I think that that's awesome. Rod accidentally did a pretty good pitch for the museum bookstore. We sell the second edition of the alt book, Roadside Geology of Blaine County. We have a few copies of that. It's a very popular seller for us. And then as well as the whole presentation really ties in pretty well with our paleontology exhibit. We're on the Montana Dinosaur Trail. And we actually have specimens related to this presentation on display. I believe the Jurassic era belemnites and the crinoids that Rod mentioned. We have specimens of those. And so please come in and check that out within the next week while all of this information is still fresh in your memories. We are open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6, so you can check out any of that information. I do want Ginger to come up here really quick. As we mentioned, this is the last presentation in our speaker series, and I think it really was a good conclusion to have, really showed how important our area is historically, as kind of a crossroads of many historical time periods. I'm going to give a quick speech here. If I've learned anything in my 5 years as director of Blaine County Museum, it is that local people like Rod Benson, like Ginger Hansen, like Jack Mattingly and Austin Haney, who are both here tonight, quite literally make history by giving so much of their time and energy for the benefit of the community. In the 1920s, the Chinook Lions, the third oldest Lions Club chapter in the state, volunteered their time and resources to help preserve what is today Bear Paw Battlefield, perhaps one of the most valuable historic sites in the West. In the 1990s, in the wake of the devastating C-141 collision that killed 13 young servicemen, the Harlem, North Harlem Colony, and Fort Belknap communities joined together to memorialize these strangers and to facilitate healing for their families, in a profound demonstration of empathy and admirable goodwill in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Indeed, it is volunteerism, collaboration, and enthusiasm that make history. So, as a small token of our appreciation, we do have a small gift for Ginger, who without her volunteerism, collaboration, and enthusiasm, none of this would have been possible.
Please tell me it's not a hike with Rod.
Okay, yes. I want to thank Rod again for being here tonight and for his energy. I think Rod's due another round of applause here tonight. Excellent presentation. And I want to thank the Blaine County Museum Board and the commissioners for supporting this program. I thank you all for attending and helping make our speaker series a really wonderful success. Thank you again.